Show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to GB News on your TV and on your digital radio. I'm Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week, and for my next 2 hours I'm going to be joined by a fantastic panel talking about some of the big topics hitting the news headlines today. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating some of the hottest topics, we'll be disagreeing, and at times we will be not cancelling each other. Joining me today is political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's take a look at the latest news headlines with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Calvin. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have warned that anyone withholding information regarding those responsible are protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot and killed by a gunman on Monday when he chased an intended target into her home. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are pleading to anyone with any information to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
A huge package of financial support has been promised by the government to help struggling households through the energy crisis. The Prime Minister has written an article in the Daily Mail where he acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. Well, the 2 Tory leadership candidates are yet to reveal exactly how they plan to ease the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak's team has criticised reports that Liz Truss plans to cut VAT by 5%, describing it as incredibly regressive. It's understood the Foreign Secretary has discussed a nuclear option with her advisers, which would reportedly save the average household more than £1,300 a year. Mr Sunak's campaign says the move would cost more than £30 billion. Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to bolster Britain's defences if she becomes Prime Minister, saying the era of complacency is over. She wants to push ahead with renewing Trident and strengthening support for intelligence services as part of her plan to protect the UK. Retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross told GB News, with Russia a continued threat, Britain needs to reconsider its defence and foreign policies.
Over these last 20 years, we have become complacent. We never really put sufficient resources in terms of military into Iraq or Afghanistan, and we weren't prepared to stay there for the length of time that we had been involved in, for example, the Cold War. So I think we have been complacent, and what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and indeed elsewhere, I mean, autocracies, dictatorships, China, and so on, has made people realise that we do need to think again about how we're going to engage in not just defence policy, but foreign policy and other aspects of our external relationships as well.
More than 25,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday, the Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey from France. A father who was jailed for torturing his son has had his release from prison blocked. Tony Hudgell was so badly abused by his parents that he needed to have both legs amputated. Anthony Smith was due to be released next month, but his case was referred to the parole board under new powers to protect the public from dangerous offenders. Tony's adoptive mother has welcomed the intervention. Victims of the Grenfell Tower disaster are being remembered at the Notting Hill Carnival today. Members of the Emancipated Run crew wore green T-shirts as the event returned to the streets of West London for the first time since 2019. Paying tribute to the 72 people who died in the fire, survivor Zoe Dainton told the crowd there's been little progress since the Grenfell inquiry.
5 years, still no justice, still no charges, not much change. And despite what happened at Grenfell, and despite endless evidence that came out of the inquiry, those responsible, including the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, seem to be suffering from amnesia and are acting like it's business as usual.
And the Brexit minister is planning to sell off £1.5 billion worth of government offices in central London. Jacob Rees-Mogg told the Sunday Telegraph taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for buildings that are underutilised, with many civil servants still working from home. He's due to publish a property strategy that will see staff operating in fewer buildings as part of a network of government hubs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to Calvin.
Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. My special guest in Outside at 5 is actor and leader of the Reclaim Party, Lawrence Fox. Lawrence was born into the Fox family acting dynasty and attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He shot to fame on the TV series Lewis, where he played DS Lewis Hathaway. In October 2020, he set up the Reclaim Party to challenge the woke orthodoxy of white privilege and systemic racism. He was cancelled from. And in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should students be taught Shakespeare? Universities are dropping Chaucer and Shakespeare as they seek to decolonise their curriculums. Names which have historically been considered literary legends are being removed from courses, and sonnets are no longer taught at some institutions, as some academics aim to stop the domination of white, Western and Eurocentric knowledge in education. And then at the end of the hour, it's Worldview. We'll be heading across the pond to America to take a look into the documents released by the FBI in regards to the raid on Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago house. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing today by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. In a moment, chaps, I'm going to be talking about the World Economic Forum. I want to bring my panel into this discussion first and foremost to get your impressions. Do you know what the World Economic Forum is? Danny?
I got to say, until this morning, when I was told what the running order consisted of, I could manage everything else except the first talking points. I'd never even heard of them.
Really?
I never heard of them. I know a little bit about them. They just seem to be an organisation made up of 4,000 or 5,000, some journalists, some celebrities, some big companies, but I'm still not sure what they do.
OK, Nigel?
Well, I don't sort of lose a lot of sleep sort of thinking about what they're about to do next. Okay. But I've always seen them as a kind of Masonic lodge for multimillionaires. Very secretive. Their finances are completely opaque, and they do seem to have this idea that multinationals could run the world better than politicians.
Right, that's the clincher, and I'll get to it in my monologue. But the idea here that we've already discussed, these are the global elite, the richest, most powerful, most influential people in the world, meeting behind closed doors to discuss our future.
Yeah.
Unelected.
Mostly men, mostly white, and to actually join up, you have to be filthy rich.
How is that democratic?
It's not democratic, and I don't think they actually pretend to be a democracy as such.
But are these not people that support or purport to support democracy?
Well, I'm not even sure they do that, because they seem to feel that they call themselves sort of internationalists, the idea being that they don't really subscribe to borders and to governments and to things like that. So from that point of view, no, they're not democratic. And the main criticism of them is that they've got this kind of idea that they're the ones that should be running the world.
Danny, now you've heard a bit more about it. What's your initial impression?
Well, it seems that I could join them. I've got some of those qualities. How influential are they, Calv? I mean, they seem to be.
If I told you that at least half of the cabinet of most worldwide governments are members of the WEF.
Right, well, that should be worrying.
And the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world are members of the WEF.
OK, well, if they're driving politics under the radar, then they should be less opaque, as Nigel said, and they should be completely transparent. If they have these sort of secretive meetings, and I know that they're based in Switzerland, which is probably the money laundering capital of the world.
I don't know if I can attest to that.
As their banking system...
Swiss lawyers are watching.
Yeah, but you can't defame a country, can you? I mean, you can't defame a country, I would have thought. So I think then, if what you're saying, if they influence politics and they're so opaque, then that's something to be really disconcerted about. Well, how would they influence our life? If they're globalists, for example, then that's something that we should certainly have a concerned opinion on. If you're not a globalist, I'm not a globalist. I believe in measured and controlled immigration. I understand all of the importance of that. So if half of governmental cabinets consist of these people who meet secretly in opaque conditions, then that's something that we should be worried about.
It's a kind of lobbying thing, really. I mean, first of all, these are some of the biggest companies in the world. Therefore, the people who run them, politicians do have to listen to them because they've got a huge amount of clout. But, I mean, I think it's the secretive aspect of it which worries me. If you're a journalist going to cover one of these things, you have different coloured passes for the bits you can actually get into. So some journalists are accepted into the inner sanctum, some aren't. I mean, there's nothing open about the whole thing. And initially, they like to portray themselves as trying to do good. I mean, one of the recent projects has been to send drones to India to deliver medicine in out-of-the-way areas on the basis that helps health inequality. But then you look at the other stuff they're doing and talking about, and it seems to be much more about control.
It sounds very Bill Gatesy. Is it Bill Gatesy?
It's very Bill Gatesy. Bill Gates is a key member of the WEF, and we'll get to that in a moment. Thank you, chaps. Good to get your impression of this. You are with me, Calvin Robertson, covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. Now, I'm going to be very careful with this first topic. Some of you might think I'm a conspiracy theorist, and that's fine. But for this monologue, I'm not going to share my own opinion at all. I'm simply going to explain the facts, or lay out the facts, and let you guys decide for yourselves whether it's a good thing or not. I want to talk about the World Economic Forum, the WEF. What is the World Economic Forum? Well, officially, it's an international non-governmental lobbying organization founded by German engineer Klaus Schwab. WEF famously hosts their annual meeting in Davos. This meeting is a gathering of the global elite, politicians, big business, celebrities, and big investors. It's a lobby group in favor of a globalized world, governments and businesses working together. George Soros spoke at Davos in 2011 about redesigning the international monetary system. Bill Gates spoke at the most recent Davos about preparing for the next pandemic. Klaus Schwab talks about the diversity of the WEF's reach in that German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Russian President Vladimir Putin are both members of the WEF. Not only are global leaders members, but Schwab goes on to say, we penetrate the cabinets. more than half of the cabinet members in the governments of Canada, Argentina, and France are aligned with the WEF. In the year before COVID, a quarter of the UK cabinet attended Davos, including Theresa May, Philip Hammond, Liam Fox, Greg Clark, Matt Hancock, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Wright. The list goes on and on. You may have heard many of these people uttering the phrase "Build Back Better" over the past couple of years. This is a WEF slogan in relation to bringing about the Great Reset, changing our social, political, and economic landscape in favour of a fourth industrial revolution. It's a campaign slogan parroted by UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, US President Joe Biden, His Royal Highness Prince Harry, and New Zealand PM Jacinda Ardern. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, as well, to name but a few. It's interesting that they're all singing from exactly the same hymn sheet. Klaus Schwab, founder of the WEF, has released a few books, most notably in 2016, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, predicting social, political, cultural, and economic changes that he said could unfold in the 21st century. His most recent book is titled COVID-19, The Great Reset, in which he sets out a catalyst for this fourth industrial revolution by taking advantage of the pandemic. Klaus Schwab spoke about using the COVID pandemic as an opportunity to bring about the Great Reset. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. His Royal Highness Prince Charles spoke at Davos 2020, saying, "As we move from rescue to recovery, therefore, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. We must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play," calling this the Great Reset. Last March, these global leaders, including our Prime Minister Boris Johnson, announced a new treaty for pandemic preparedness and response, which would give the World Health Organization unprecedented control over sovereign nations. The idea being that in a time of global emergency, one world government could respond quicker to, and I quote, "keep the world safe and serve the vulnerable so everyone everywhere can attain the highest level of health." I'll say that again for emphasis, one world government. In June of this year, the WEF tweeted a promotional message. "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." After I tweeted it, or retweeted it, highlighting what I perceived to be neo-feudalism, the tweet was deleted. But that is not the first time they've promoted the message, "You will own nothing and be happy." 2030 is not that far away. We have since entered a cost of living crisis, and a European war has broken out in Ukraine. And coincidentally, the United Nations set a 2030 agenda for sustainability. Their top goals are being no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being. The same people involved, Bill Gates, Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson, have all been seen wearing the Agenda 2030 badge, subscribing to the policy. To reiterate, none of what I've said is conspiratorial. It's all from official literature, all from official websites of the WEF and the UK. The WEF is an unaccountable body of global elites lobbying for a globalist agenda. That's a basic fact. Which raises the question, all of this talk of building back better, we must ask, build back better for whom? Right, back to my panel. Danny and Nigel, you've heard a bit more about what's going on. I'm going to come to you, Danny, because you look surprised.
Well, at least we now know when fuel prices are coming down. It's 2030, where we're all going to be skint.
Because we won't need it.
We're all going to be skint, but we'll all be happy as well.
We will have nothing.
We'll have absolutely nothing.
But if we have nothing, who will have everything?
It smacks of worldwide socialism. But what the juxtaposition with that is the fact that all of these corporate conglomerates, all of these filthy rich billionaires and capitalists are in on it.
Right, so it's like capitalist communism.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
And yes, I don't think it's actually anything socialist about it, because these are the richest people in the world, and they're part of the people, the 1% of people who control 48% of the world's wealth. What was interesting about your monologue were the various bits you chose from that, because some of the basic ideas, I mean, the Great Reset was an idea that came along before COVID, but some of the ideas that come out of that are things that are already happening and actually should be happening. So COVID has brought about a kind of reset. A lot more of us work from home, or at least work from home part-time. Probably a good thing. We've changed the way we work.
Is it a good thing, though? More automation, more people losing their jobs, we're squeezing out...
Well, not necessarily more people losing their jobs, but the idea that you can be more flexible about your work is great for families. So I think that we are experimenting all the way through about the best way of doing it. Things like a 4-day week. There are now 70 companies in the UK experimenting with a 4-day week, which if it goes along with what's happened in other countries, productivity will either remain the same or go up. And you've got other ideas being banded around. The idea of a universal basic income, which would take away the benefit system as we know it, so everyone would get a set amount of money, and simplify the whole thing. So these are all things that are coming in on the back of COVID, which in a sense is a reset.
But so many people would see this as them using COVID to shoehorn in these policies. UBI is a good example, because a lot of people would be terrified of the idea of not being able to contribute, not being able to properly be productive in society, and being dependent on a state.
So UBI doesn't do any of that. I mean, the whole point about UBI is that we've started with a very complicated benefit system, because bits were tagged on since it was invented in 1948. We've come down to universal credit, which is simpler, but doesn't work that well. If you were to give everybody a set amount of money, you take it back in taxation as people get better and better jobs. Now, I'm not convinced it's going to work.
You're not convincing me either.
No, well, I'm not convinced it's going to work. But what I do think is it's worth the experimentation. The Welsh government are already doing it. They've got 500...
I don't want to be experimented on. I'd rather vote for something like this, and I don't think anyone has. But we'll leave it there for now. Thank you. You are with Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News, on your TV and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate. This hour, I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Universities are dropping Chaucer and Shakespeare as they seek to decolonise their curriculums. Names which have historically been considered literary legends are being removed from courses, and sonnets are no longer taught at some institutions, as some academics aim to stop the domination of white, Western and Eurocentric knowledge in education. Send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and tell us what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews, and there's a poll up right now asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Cast your votes. First, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England, with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales now, plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall, temperatures around 21. And a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end to the day for the northeast of England, although there will be some glimmers of sunshine. Feeling fairly pleasant despite that cloud. Temperatures around 20 and the wind's quite light. A bright end to the day for southern Scotland as dusk approaches. Light winds and dry weather, feeling pleasant. Temperatures around 17 to 19. On the cloudy side, if we head over to Northern Ireland for this evening, and we're told scattered showers across the country. Some of those on the heavy side. Temperatures about 17. So lots of places across the UK remaining dry overnight tonight. Some clear spells, though a few showers for some in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. It's time for the great British debate. I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Some students heading to university in September may find no sign of Shakespeare, Chaucer or Jane Austen in their courses. Many British universities have removed the literary giants from their syllabus in an effort to decolonise the curriculum and move away from white, Western and Eurocentric knowledge, whatever that means. Some academics believe that removing such authors from their modules will tackle the discrepancy in average marks between white students and those from ethnic minority backgrounds. So for our great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? I have the pleasure of being joined by Don't Divide Us director, Dr. Alka Cuthbert. Alka, how are you?
Hello, Calvin. Fine, thank you.
Good. This sounds to me straight off the bat like a patronising assumption that black people are not clever enough to understand Shakespeare. Am I misunderstanding this?
Yes, I think it is very patronising. I mean, their argument, to pass their argument, is they're saying that they're making the claim that knowledge and even thinking itself is completely reducible to politics. They're the same thing. And that is really quite dangerous because it allows no room for the kind of free space for independent thinking. So it's really, really patronising. It's also wrong. It's kind of like historically wrong because I think it concedes far too much to the idea that everything that has been produced or that is a preserve of the West is for white people only. I mean, this is really a bit of a nonsense because when you think of how knowledge and culture has developed, you know, hybridity and appropriation are central to it.
Well, Shakespeare is a great example of that, isn't it? Because Shakespeare belongs to the world, surely.
So I missed that.
Surely Shakespeare belongs to the world.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if knowledge is, you know, if knowledge is to, if you like, pass all the various tests, and that includes the test of time, then it becomes universal. It does so precisely because its generalizable power or its application, if you're talking about the sciences, is, you know, extends far beyond the specific context of its production. That's what makes it really good, powerful knowledge or powerful literature that appeals to everyone, from, you know, people like my dad who read Shakespeare in an Indian village on a dirt floor to, you know, undergraduates at Oxbridge.
And Dr. Alka, can I ask you in this context, what does decolonisation actually mean? Because there were no colonies when these people were writing, surely.
No, they weren't. The ideology of decolonising is a very, it's an ideology very pertinent to the current moment. It's, like I said before, it's based on seeing politics everywhere. Everything becomes politicised. In this case, even, knowledge and our thinking. And these become proxies for power, and it's like they have no reality in themselves. So you can see it's incredibly anti-intellectual. People advocating it, what is rather worrying is that this is being advocated and quite aggressively promoted by people in bodies like Advanced HE in the higher education sector, professional bodies, the National Association of Teachers of English amongst teachers, exam boards. You can see it spreading beyond the citadels of academia itself. Our recent report shows how councils, when a lot of councils who are reaching out, trying to make themselves over in a new anti-racist way, see decolonising as a justified, and a good thing to do without any understanding of how wrong, how flawed it is. And also, it's like incredibly, as you said, it is really patronising to think. It's saying to students, you can only really learn and achieve if you literally see yourself represented, right? That means you have no imagination.
I've got to move on, but before I go, I want to ask, what can people do if they want to find out more alternatives to this decolonisation nonsense? Where can they go, please?
Please come to our website. We have lots on decolonising. We have school materials, curriculum materials that are really that are based on a far more liberal and humanistic approach. Look at our website. If you like us, join us, help us, challenge it, help us make more materials.
Plug in there. What's the website, Alka? What's the website?
The website, don'tdivideus.com.
There we go. Thank you very much. That's Dr. Alka Cuthbert, Director of Don't Divide Us. I'm also joined now by Iman Aiton. Iman is an activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests. Iman and I have debated many times over the years. So Iman, start me off. What's your perspective on this? Why do you think that people like Shakespeare and Chaucer should no longer be taught?
So I think it's just about finding balance, right? And I think maybe for universities, they feel that a part or a lot of their curriculum is whitewashed, and so trying to find that balance, maybe removing Shakespeare and etc. And ultimately, this is with the aim of increasing student engagement. That's always the priority. That should be the main priority of any university. So when it comes down to anti-racism and decolonising the curriculum, they're one and the same. All right. So decolonising the curriculum isn't just.
I'm not quite sure how removing Shakespeare or Chaucer is anti-racist or decolonising. So I need to push you a bit further on that. What does that mean? Is it just removing dead white men?
No, let me continue. So let me continue, and then hopefully you'll have a bit more of a wider perspective. So anti-racism and decolonising the curriculum are one and the same. So decolonising the curriculum isn't just about the content, it's also about pedagogies, all right? So the way in which we teach, and that is ultimately centred around student engagement. So it is both the content and the pedagogies that contribute to the attainment gap, which is ultimately what we're referring to. And this is why there were many reports over the years that offer these same recommendations. For example, the Equality Human Rights Commission of 2019 that delves into racial harassment in higher education. Universities UK also released a report in 2020 with the same results. We also have Universities UK reports for 2019 that was called Closing the Gap, and that is all about the attainment gap. They released an updated version this year, and it's called Closing the Gap 3 years on. And all of these four reports, the recommendations are more or less the same. It includes a whole institutional approach in terms of tackling racial disparities and racial harassment. It also includes having conversations about race, right, centered around race equality, etc. It also talks about Wait, hold on for a second. It also talks about.
I have let you talk for a couple of minutes. And direct these questions a bit, if you don't mind. Because I'm a little bit confused.
It also talks about inclusion.
Iman, I'm going to ask you a question.
Hold on. That's important
and let you talk,
in terms
let
of
me ask the
students'
question.
engagement.
We're talking here about the knowledge being delivered being too white, too Western, and too Eurocentric. In Great Britain, a predominantly white country, should it not be okay for the curriculum to be covering a majority of white authors, Western authors, European authors? Is it not backwards thinking to say, actually, to be more inclusive, we need to remove white people and add more black people? Surely to be inclusive means adding people, not removing. And what is wrong?
I've given you the answer twice. So I said it when I first
Then
started.
I must be dense because I'm not understanding how this is helping.
The disparities and racial harassment, and there is evidence. There's qualitative evidence and quantitative evidence to say that these representations make a difference. Hold on a second.
Suggesting that ethnic minorities and white people learn Shakespeare and Chaucer differently?
You want me to answer? I'm going to answer, but let me finish. At this point,
I'll let you answer the question, but I'm not going to let shout over you.
I'm answering the question. Let's move forward. All of these things contribute to the attainment gap. This is the goal, to decrease the attainment gap.
We all want to decrease the attainment gap.
In order to decrease the attainment gap, you need to increase student engagement. In order to do that, you need to ensure that
so ethnic minority people cannot engage with Shakespeare.
University are engaged. That is why you find balance. So if there is too much Shakespeare, you take some out and you replace it with something that is more engaging for the various cohorts within the classroom. It's as simple as that.
Love your explanation. Thank you very much. Iman Aiton, anti-racism activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests. Thank you very much. I'm not entirely convinced that removing classical literary giants such as Shakespeare increases engagement for ethnic minorities in a way that it doesn't for white people. I'm not sure that white people learn things differently to ethnic minorities. I think that's patronising and racist, but let's find out what you guys think. I am Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. And after the break, we'll continue this great British debate. I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. First, here's the latest news.
Hello, it's 4:34. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have warned that anyone withholding information regarding those responsible are protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot and killed by a gunman on Monday when he chased an intended target into her home. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are pleading to anyone with any information to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
The Prime Minister says a huge package of financial support will be delivered to help struggling households through the energy crisis. Writing in the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. More than 25,000 migrants have crossed the Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday, the Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey from France. Millions of people are expected to attend the Notting Hill Carnival in West London, which is back after a 2-year break because of the pandemic. Europe's biggest street festival celebrates a fusion of Caribbean, African and European cultures. Today is Family Day, featuring a children's parade and music. It ends tomorrow with the adults putting on a colourful show. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. Back to our great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Many British universities have removed Chaucer and Shakespeare from their curriculum as they seek to decolonise their campuses. A range of subjects are being unpicked by universities in a bid to weed out knowledge they see as privileged and Western. For our great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Let's have a quick look at what you guys have been saying. Charlie says, without Shakespeare, the English language is dead. A bit of a hyperbole, but I see what you're trying to say there. John says, I think Shakespeare is outdated and boring. I would rather read George Orwell. His books are entertaining and great for critical thinking. Problem about Orwell's books is they're coming true at the moment, isn't it? Fred says, I'm in two minds. I think it is important as it's part of Britain's heritage, but then again, I think it is irrelevant in this day and age. Shakespeare will never be irrelevant. He helped shape this nation's language, our history, heritage, culture, lots of phrases and words, the arts, such an impact, such an influence. Let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined by political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, let's start with you, Nigel. Is Shakespeare on the way out? Is he too outdated?
No, and it shouldn't be. And I felt all the way through that I'd like to have agreed with Iman, but I couldn't quite understand the point that she was making. And
well, this is why I kept re-asking. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was just trying to get to the crux of what she was saying.
I think it was actually why there is a problem here. And the whole point of Shakespeare is that he tells universal truths about human nature. And on the basis of that, that should be as easily relevant to a 21st century Ethiopian as an Elizabethan Englishman.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of it.
You and I have had similar conversations about the Bible. I know you're not practicing Christian, but you appreciate that it's influenced
Shakespeare may have had out of the Bible, that there is a hidden byline in there that he may have put in. Anyway, that's a different subject. So because of that, Shakespeare should be, as Alka said, universal. Now, if we have problems with certain parts of it, say, for instance, you take Othello, there is some racist language in Othello by our standards. In fact, the bad guy is a white bloke, Iago. So if you put that into context and the age he lived in, that's fine. But you don't then throw the whole thing away completely.
Absolutely. Danny, what's your thoughts?
I'm not convinced that if there was any racism in Othello, I'm not convinced that that's, what was that lady's name, the BLM? I don't think that was her point. I think her point, if I understand correctly, and I think if I've got this right, it's terrible what she said, but basically, to distill it, black people can only engage with black authors.
Yeah. I think she was saying that they need
was that the gist of
to
what
remove
she was
Shakespeare
saying?
to get more engagement from black people.
To get more engagement. Oh,
so what does that mean?
Well, look, I think it's wrong. I think since the terrible murder of George Floyd, the world has changed beyond all recognition, and the Americans have a phrase for this. And you only need to look at television adverts nowadays. You know, it's like living in Africa sometimes.
Right.
You often wonder, OK, I understand that representation is important, but as a white guy, it's also important for a white guy. Why is it only important for black or Afro-Caribbean families to be represented on television? Why can't a white family
That's a fascinating point, because it is overcorrection, isn't it? Because we have had a history, a mixed history, but now we're trying to overcorrect and show actually every single advertisement needs to have a black guy, a mixed race child, someone with an afro. Like, if I wanted to go into advertisements, I'd be laughing right now. But when you look at other cultures, they don't do this. So Nigeria, just this week, have banned whites in their ads. There are no white people in Nigerian advertisements. So that's going too far the other way.
I mean, I think that when it comes to that on TV, again, if it's in context, that you have black families or Asian families or whatever, and the drama works that way, that is fine. But, I mean, a recent remake of Darling Buds of May set in the Kent of the 1950s had a variety of people from ethnic backgrounds in it that would never have been in the 1950s Kent. That jarred, and eventually you end up switching it off. A decent drama where you can have, in fact, entirely black actors works brilliantly.
But Nigel, that is the televisual equivalent of what that lady was arguing for, representation for the sake of representation. No longer is it a meritocracy. I would like to see an alternative, an African alternative to Shakespeare, or an African alternative to Chaucer.
Well, this is the thing. So I used to be a teacher, and I found that kids engage with good content, and Shakespeare tends to be good content. But these things have to be taught well as well. There are a lot of people out there that find Shakespeare boring because they weren't taught it very well. They didn't understand the connection between the old world language and what we speak today. And all of this is important, but you cannot ever try to say that people are taught differently because of their race, or people understand things differently because of their race, because that is fundamentally racist.
Yes, it is racist. Yeah, that's right.
And also, I think there is an element of, well, if black kids can only engage, or it would help the attainment gap, but if black kids engage better with black authors, then I think that is fundamentally racist.
But the worrying thing there is that the implication is that if you're a white kid, you can't engage with a black author.
Right.
That's correct,
So should we segregate schools? Should we have white schools and black schools?
And we're back in sort of 1970s South Africa.
I'm not suggesting that, of course not. But this is how backwards the thinking is. We need to raise aspirations for everyone, raise attainment for everyone, and not focus on one particular demographic. Otherwise, we end up in backwards waters. I want to ask you one more question, both of you. Is there something wrong with knowledge being white, Western and Eurocentric?
I think, again, it's about context, that we cannot impose our values on the past. So it's a question of actually understanding that past. In a sense, we have to put ourselves in that position. So there's nothing inherently wrong. It's a kind of awareness. So, for instance, United Nations is basically a Western Christian morality that keeps it going. We have colonization was good because it exported Christianity. The modern equivalent of that is we invade Islamic countries because we're exporting Western democracy. What needs to happen is not that those things. I'm both a Democrat and a Christian. I'm not saying that those two things are
Context
bad,
and balance.
but they need to be explained. You need to justify.
Real quickly, last word to Dan.
OK, you're underestimating intelligent kids if you think they can't differentiate between what a white author is saying and then go home and think that is fundamentally flawed because there's no black authors on the course.
Spot on.
These are intelligent kids.
Danny, you should be a teacher. Right, this show is nothing without you and your views, so let's see what our great British voice has to say this hour. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. And this hour, we're heading to Lichfield to speak to Sue Hannam. Sue is also in education. Sue, straight off the bat, I'd love to know what you think about this whole decolonisation argument. Are you decolonising your curriculum?
No, I think the most important thing about a curriculum is that it's really balanced, and I think it needs to have breadth. I also happen to be an English graduate and an English and drama teacher, and you only have to look at some of the productions of Shakespeare that have been done to understand how Shakespeare in particular can be hugely enabling in terms of exploring all sorts of ideas around race, around gender. One of the great joys of teaching English is that you always teach context with the text, and that can be the thing that brings it alive. I think it would be a great shame for us to lose Shakespeare from our education system.
The Shakespeare Globe has recently been experimenting with ideas. They made Joan of Arc a trans figure. Now, something I disagree with, but they're welcome to try. And that just shows how diverse this content can be, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the more variety you can throw in, and you know, I really admire what Danny's saying about young people being intelligent, because they are, and too often they get a bad press. And if you give a text to a class and give them enough tools to enable them to unpick it and have a debate about it, then you get some really good learning going on. If you remove the text, you remove all of the debate, you remove the learning. I think it's a tragedy, really.
Right, so let's keep it with the learning. How do we plug the attainment gap? Is it about addressing different cultures in different ways? What's your approach?
I think some of what Iman was saying about breadth is actually right. And I do think she's right in terms of engagement. You've got to teach things in a way that is engaging. And believe you me, you know, I've spent over 20 years teaching Shakespeare to goodness knows how many teenagers. Some have loved it, some are indifferent, and some perhaps never want to see me again, you know. We are constantly in education trying to find ways of making everything that we teach accessible to the children, but also providing a degree of stretch, because what you don't want is to sort of dumb things down so that they're not having to really grapple. And the language of Shakespeare is not easy. You almost have to tune into it like you tune into another language, really. And I think there's a huge benefit to youngsters in having to rise to some of those challenges. The same thing with Chaucer, which, you know, for most youngsters is even more impenetrable, really.
I think you're spot on there. I think we're at threat of going down to the lowest common denominator if we go down this decolonisation route, and that's something we definitely need to avoid. Sue Hannam from Lichfield, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Today I'm asking, should students be taught Shakespeare? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Jane says, as someone with a degree in history, I find it ridiculous that the idea of Shakespeare being erased from the curriculum is even entertained, yet alone enacted. Great Britain decolonised a long time ago. Students should learn from our long and illustrious history and literature, and we should not erase authors. I would say Great Britain was never colonised in the first place. It didn't need to be decolonised. Andy says the decolonising mantra is a red herring and simply reflects our drive to erase our culture and traditions, remaking the world in an image more acceptable to the self-proclaimed progressives. You're spot on there, Andy. It's all self-flagellation, isn't it? You won't see any other country saying, actually, we need to be less Japanese or less Chinese, but over here we have to be less white all the time. What is that? David says, so black and ethnic minorities cannot understand Shakespeare, Jane Austen and the like. This is a totally racist assumption. Yep. And Marilyn says, of course we should still teach Shakespeare and Chaucer. We should be proud of our heritage and not ashamed. I despair of our universities if we are going to remove our best playwrights. And that is it right there. We should be teaching the best there has been. That's the whole purpose of the canon. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? Currently, 86% of you say yes and 14% say no. Now, you are with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GBNews on TV and on digital radio. And after the break, it's Worldview. We're going to be heading over to the pond to America to take a look into the documents released by the FBI in regards to the raid on Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago house. First, it's a short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. It's time for Worldview, and today we are crossing over to America. There's always something going on with Donald Trump, and this week has been no different. It's been nearly 3 weeks since the FBI raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. And the heavily redacted official documents regarding the matter was released on Friday, revealing that agents had uncovered 184 unique documents, some of which were marked with the highest level of classification. I'm joined by the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Paul, thank you for joining us today. First of all, give me a rundown on this, because I've tried to look into this issue and I cannot understand there's a difference between classified, confidential, secret, top secret, unclassified. What's the bulk of what's been discovered?
The bulk is classified. There are a good number, because of the redaction of the search warrant, we can't actually ascertain exactly what proportion are top secret, above top secret, classified, etc. But the word is that they're predominantly classified. And again, wiser men than I would be able to differentiate the levels between a classified document and an above top secret document.
Problem in that there was no proper receipt for this, and Trump's asked for a special master to review which documents were taken.
Yes, and a federal judge has actually has intimated that they will approve his application for a master. And a master in this case is, I think we have a similar thing in English law, but this is a neutral party to oversee the documents, to oversee the actual. They almost act as if they're an investigative judge. So they will actually investigate the case and the scale of the documents and see if there is actually enough. Because remember, what we're doing here is gathering evidence in view of a prosecution, or with a potential view to a prosecution. So it's actually good news for the Trump camp that the Judge Cannon, a federal judge in Florida, one of his appointees actually has has intimated that they're going to approve his application for a master to be appointed.
Okay, so has he been indicted, and or will he be indicted?
He hasn't yet. I think the fact that, look, you can find people on both sides of the camp saying he definitely will. I have to say, I think he probably will be indicted, because there is legal precedent here. What we're dealing with is the Justice Department, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is the Attorney General. And he was actually, if you remember, he became very prominent in 2016 because he was going to be appointed to the Supreme Court, but his appointment was blocked. Okay, so some think that there is an axe to grind with the Republican right for preventing him joining the Supreme Court. But there is actually a legal precedent with Petraeus, and General Petraeus, who was head of the CIA, who was indicted and fined, ultimately pleaded guilty to mishandling of classified documents. And because it's Merrick Garland, and because he works very much on precedent, I do think that he's going to be citing that mishandling of classified documents by Petraeus, the former head of the CIA, as the legal precedent to be able to move forward and to indict. So I actually think it is likely.
Okay. And speaking of legal precedents, this is a precedent, isn't it? That a president being raided by the FBI. There are some that would say it's potentially political. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's entirely political. Look, Hillary Clinton disposed of 30,000 emails, which nobody denies that they are classified. And she was never raided. You have to remember, this raid is being portrayed as if it was, that Trump was holding out like the Alamo and there was some sort of siege going on. Yeah. He handed over documents in December last year, or he sort of began the discussion with the Archives Department last December. In January, they handed over documents. His lawyers were dealing with the FBI in June this year. This has all been actually very, very cordial. So such a sledgehammer to crack a nut is political. I will say that there are those who think that this is actually a way to almost make Trump a martyr, because there are many on the left who believe that Trump is beatable and DeSantis isn't. The biggest political victim of this is DeSantis, because it's actually martyred Donald Trump. There is no way now anybody but Trump can be the nominee. And so politically, DeSantis is the biggest loser from this.
Unless, of course, Trump is no longer allowed to stand for president if he's found guilty of these crimes.
Well, that would be the desire, but I don't think there is enough time left in the game to be able to, after we have these midterm elections in November, and then we actually have a new Congress in January, whatever is done in these investigations will be undone by any subsequent political administration. We are going to have a lame duck presidency basically after January. I mean, we've all got a semi-literal one now, but
I was going to say, how would that change anything?
A true. I know, no change there. Exactly, it might actually be a step up. So we're going to see whatever's done being undone or challenged at least. I mean, look, at the very least, you're going to see a committee to investigate the 2020 election being set up. And, there's going to be a lot of cross-referencing and true politics happening, basically, after January 2023. So I don't think there is actually time to be able to process this, especially with the potential of the Florida federal judge allowing a master to come in. I think that's going to slow down the whole operation. So I think we're going to be able to run this. We're going to run this out of time eventually. But I think that any indictment will come after any nomination, and I think it more pushes Trump to declare his nomination.
If this is a witch hunt, we're also seeing him being attacked on other fronts, aren't we? So what's going on with the taxes? What's going on with the January 6th event? All of this adds together to a wider picture, doesn't it? And also,
absolutely, no. It's a total witch hunt. It's an absolute abuse of power. There's no doubt about it. Well, any sane person looking at this, there's no doubt about it. Look at the people who are crowing about how wonderful it is that we are looking to indict a former president. Like I said, I think that there is a view by very Machiavellian kind of minds thinking that it's a way to nobble DeSantis. I don't think so. I think that when you actually see how clumsy the FBI have been, remember, the FBI in 2016, there was an exchange of texts, if you remember that story, saying we're not going to let him win. These are political appointed government departments. People forget the FBI might feel neutral, but it's part of the actual, it's under the auspices of the Attorney General, who is a presidential appointee.
And Paul, there's also the issue with the FBI hiding the Hunter Biden case from social media, but let's not get into that right now. Paul Dudridge, thank you so much for joining us, host of the Politics People podcast. You're watching Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana This Week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. This is Calvin Robinson covering for Nana This Week on GB News. For the next hour, me and my panel will be talking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get the news headlines.
Thanks, Calvin. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have warned that anyone withholding information regarding those responsible are protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot and killed by a gunman on Monday when he chased an intended target into her home. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are pleading to anyone with any information to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
A huge package of financial support has been promised by the government to help struggling households through the energy crisis. The Prime Minister has written an article in the Daily Mail where he acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. Well, the two Tory leadership candidates are yet to reveal exactly how they plan to ease the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak's team has criticised reports that Liz Truss plans to cut VAT by 5%, describing it as incredibly regressive. It's understood the Foreign Secretary has discussed a nuclear option with her advisers, which would reportedly save the average household more than £1,300 a year. Mr Sunak's campaign says the move would cost more than £30 billion. Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to bolster Britain's defences if she becomes Prime Minister, saying the era of complacency is over. She wants to push ahead with renewing Trident and strengthening support for intelligence services as part of her plan to protect the UK. Retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross told GB News, with Russia a continued threat, Britain needs to reconsider its defence and foreign policies.
Over these last 20 years, we have become complacent. We never really put sufficient resources in terms of military into Iraq or Afghanistan, and we weren't prepared to stay there for the length of time that we had been involved in, for example, the Cold War. So I think we have been complacent, and what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and indeed elsewhere, I mean, autocracies, dictatorships, China, and so on, has made people realise that we do need to think again about how we're going to engage in not just defence policy, but foreign policy and other aspects of our external relationships as well.
More than 25,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday, the Ministry of Defence saying they were all on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey across from France. A father who was jailed for torturing his son has had his release from prison blocked. Tony Hudgell was so badly abused by his parents that he needed to have both his legs amputated. Anthony Smith was due to be released next month, but his case was referred to the parole board under new powers to protect the public from dangerous offenders. Tony's adoptive mother has welcomed the intervention. Victims of the Grenfell Tower disaster are being remembered at the Notting Hill Carnival. Members of the Emancipated Run crew wore T-shirts as the event returned to the streets of West London for the first time since 2019. Paying tribute to the 72 people who died in the fire, survivor Zoe Dainton told the crowd there's been little progress since the Grenfell inquiry.
5 years, still no justice, still no charges, not much change. And despite what happened at Grenfell, and despite endless evidence that came out of the inquiry, those responsible, including the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, seem to be suffering from amnesia and are acting like it's business as usual.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Calvin.
This is GB News. I'm Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly, who hasn't made it back from the loo yet. Each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We'll talk about the highs, the lows, the lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. Today, my special guest is actor and leader of the Reclaim Party, Laurence Fox. Laurence was born into the Fox family acting dynasty and attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He shot to fame on the TV series Lewis, where he played DS James Hathaway. In October 2020, he set up the Reclaim Party to challenge the woke orthodoxy of white privilege and systemic racism. He was cancelled. And in the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? According to reports, Prince Andrew's daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, have begged their uncle Prince Charles to allow their father back into the firm. But it's been reported that Prince Charles has rejected their request. Prince Andrew has been marred in controversy over his links to convicted sex offenders Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Since all of this, the royal family have kept Prince Andrew away from the spotlight. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Now it's time for Outside, and today we're joined by actor and leader of the Reclaim Party, my good friend Lawrence Fox. Lawrence was born into the Fox acting family dynasty and attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He shot to fame on the TV series Lewis, where he played DS James Hathaway solving grisly murders in the university town of Oxford. The actor has also enjoyed big roles on stage with a string of notable theatre performances. Now, Lawrence has turned his attention towards politics and is the leader of the Reclaim Party, and its main aim is to combat extremely political correctness. Back in 2021, he entered the London mayoral race, but was unsuccessful in his endeavour. In recent times, he's made headlines over some controversial opinions. This included his objection to lockdown during the pandemic. And away from the working world, Lawrence has popped the question to his girlfriend earlier this year. I'm now joined by the man himself, Lawrence Fox. Lawrence, straight from Skiathos. Give us a bit of your background, Lawrence. How did you get into acting?
Hi, Father Calvin. How did I get into acting? I fell into it because I was really bad at everything else. So one morning, my dad said to me, why don't you try acting? Which I then did. And I was very lucky, and I got a part in a film called The Hole in 2001. And then I worked pretty solidly. And as you say, I was in Lewis for a long time. Can I just say at this point that I'm very upset that you say I was unsuccessful in my bid for London Mayor, because it's very obvious that I won and the results were rigged.
Well, it depends what your endeavour was. We said we were unsuccessful in your endeavour, but what was your endeavour? Was it to win, or was it to, get a political argument out there?
Yeah, well, it was to try. It was to, I'm not a professional politician, so it was to work out how to campaign and to do all of those sorts of things and learn the lessons that needed to be learned. And it was, I thought it was really valuable. And then people sort of go, "You were unsuccessful," and I go, "A football stadium full of people voted for me. I take that as a great compliment." Yeah. And there were no Dominion voting machines. I definitely would have won by. Probably 95% majority of Londoners would have voted for me.
Well, we'll get to other issues, but I do want to start with Reclaim, because what is the point of the political arm of your organisation? Are you trying to influence politics in Westminster? Are you trying to be a support structure for people who feel they are a silent majority? What is your aim? What's the goal?
I think the goal, the most important goal, is to have some sort of balance in politics where Labour represent working people and look after their rights, and the Conservatives try and conserve our cultural heritage, the environment, everything that matters to us as a nation. And because that's sort of become a uniparty approach to everything nowadays, mainly I want to make the Conservatives conservative, because as my backer said to me during my London mayoral campaign, he said, "No one would want you in charge of the tubes, Loz."
Well, fantastic. Making the Conservatives conservative again is something that a lot of our viewers could get behind. But moving back to your acting a little bit, did you have any favourite roles or any favourite areas? Did you prefer TV, movie, theatre?
It was all a great pleasure until about 2018, when everything became about oppression, skin colour, class, and sexual orientation. And I remember very distinctly sitting around it. What's that? Sorry?
Is that on screen or off screen? Off
screen. So I remember very clearly sitting around a table, a very diverse table, as you often find in an acting environment, and a young what do you call them? Are you allowed to say actress anymore, or is that also? Are you allowed to say actress?
On this show, you can say
actress. Female actor was complaining about her oppression, and I said, "How much you want a week, babe?" And she went, 25 grand. And I went, "Yeah, sounds a lot of oppression to me. My heart bleeds for you."
Absolutely.
So it just stopped becoming about. It stopped becoming about what art is meant to be about, which is art is about creating, not destroying. And it just became less and less fun. I decided that I wasn't going to walk around apologising for the fact that by dint of my birth, I happen to have white skin and blonde hair and look a little bit like Thor when he's missed a few workouts. And I just wanted to, it became boring. It started to become dull, and it started preaching at itself, show business. And then I've been granted a brief sabbatical to return to acting, to play Hunter Biden, which I suppose is possibly not the best career move, seeing as the last 2 years have also been spent trying to make sure that the Hunter Biden story is not being told in its entirety.
But it must be good to be acting again, because that's what you love, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody in this country should be denied the opportunity to do what they want to do. I think we live in one of the most beautiful meritocratic countries on earth, and the equality of opportunity should be granted to all, and equality of outcomes should be resisted as much as possible. But yeah, there's a real sense of a bittersweet sense of sadness that I'm not allowed to do the job I want to do because I happen to hold views which aren't concordant with the present fashionable orthodoxy, which is sort of wokeism.
Right, I was going to say you got cancelled, but you didn't really get cancelled because you're still doing important work. But what was the breaking point that moved you from towing the line, so to speak, getting on with the job as an actor, to going on Question Time and saying, actually, no, love, I'm not a racist. What you just said is racist. When did you realise you'd had enough and you wanted to fight back?
Because I hate racism. We're all made equally in the eyes of God, and we're commanded to love our neighbour as ourselves. So I hate racism. So if someone sits there and goes to me, your opinion matters less because you happen to be a white privileged male, I think that it's absolutely unutterably intolerable that sort of racism is allowed and is mainstreamed and promoted across this country more and more, as we're seeing every day. I think racism is abhorrent and disgusting and vile. And, you as a white supremacist yourself would understand that.
I do, very much so. Which brings me to the Bad Law Project, because you're fighting back against all this anti-racism wokeness stuff. How is Bad Law going to help people? Bad Law is going to help people by clarifying where law has gone wrong. So, as you've seen, the police are a law unto themselves at the moment, and they are turning around. Sorry, we see my son playing football in the background. The police have been saying, causing offence is an offence. No, it's not. Causing offence is not an offence at all. And what the Bad Law Project aims to do is to clarify law for people. So if people are coming under their scrutiny or bullying authoritarianism with the police, such as Darren Brady did in the case that we highlighted very recently, we are there to protect the ordinary person and provide them with financial and legal support when any institution goes up against them. We also have a case against their Tavistock clinic upcoming because a trading psychotherapist will not acknowledge that she, by dint again of an immutable characteristic, is not in some way a white supremacist. Lawrence. We can't talk about live cases, but I also want to clarify that I'm not actually a white supremacist, and this is an inside joke between you and I. But the fact that I have to clarify that just shows how big the problem is, doesn't it? And hi, Eugene.
Hi, Eugene. Calvin says hi, you're on TV.
But the problem is so widespread now, isn't it? That we're automatically censoring ourselves and correcting ourselves, and we feel like we're under constant pressure to do so.
Yeah, it's the worst thing in the world. The most important thing in life is the right to free expression, and unfortunately, some of that involves the free expression of views that people don't like. And that's not saying we're promoting views that are naturally divisive. It's just to say, if we don't protect people's right to have these views and to talk about things, then essentially you're living in a state which is authoritarian, totalitarian, very controlling and uncreative and inward-looking and failing.
So how do we shift from that to get to a place where you can get back into acting?
Well, I should probably be a bit less provocative as you give me that advice on a very daily basis. But actually, no, I think art should start to reflect culture. It should hold a mirror up to nature rather than a mirror up to its own self. It's a sort of, this unending mirror that it does. I think that you should be able to act regardless of your political views. I mean, unless you say something really, truly horrendous. But at the end of the day, all I said was, let's not focus on things that people can't change. That's all I ever said. So I hope that there will be a switch. You notice that Top Gun Maverick's done very well in the cinemas, and you know, it's a film about, against all odds, someone succeeding in their way. So I was, you know, I was pleased with that, and I think the culture will change in that way slowly.
Well, Lawrence Fox, actor and leader of the Reclaim Party, enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thank you and God bless.
We miss you.
Miss you too, bro. All right, Danny, Nigel, what are your thoughts? Should people be able to just do a simple job, get on with the job without having to censor themselves, without having to tread around on eggshells and play the woke game?
Depends on the job, I think. And in the case of Lawrence Fox, that if you're watching somebody on television and you want that person to be in the part they're doing, which is his acting job, you don't want to be thinking all the time, oh yeah, he's the politician too. So if you've been advising him not to be so provocative about his career, you're absolutely right. If he wants to be an actor...
But this is before. So he entered politics to change it because he couldn't be an actor and hold certain opinions, such as this country isn't institutionally racist, because there's a perception that you have to be part of the approved narrative. And if you're not, you get cast aside and cancelled. This is why we talk about being cancelled all the time on this channel, because people feel like they can't speak out. So I'll come back to you, but Danny, do you feel like you should be able to do your day job without having to be woke?
Do you know, I feel sorry for that lad. I really do, because he has been cancelled to a certain extent, and I'm made up. I mean, I disagree with him about his COVID point of view, but with everything else, I find common ground. And the fact that he has, for a couple of years, lost work because of his political views, or his views that the UK isn't institutionally racist, that's not a political view, it's just a matter of fact. And the fact that I think the tide is turning like an incredibly slow oil tanker. I think the tide is turning somewhat. And this is something that I predicted about a year ago on this show. When wokeness meets commercialism. Now, at some point when things become so woke, people tune away. And at that point, the advertisers and the people in charge of making a living through TV and through radio, they have to change. And I think that the greatest sea change was when Dave Chappelle, when Netflix, they had protests from their staff saying that this is transphobic and everything. And the boss of Netflix, he knew which side his bread was buttered on. He said, if you don't like it, go and work for someone else.
That's a fair point, Nigel.
Well, yeah, I do come back to the idea that it does depend on what job you do, and so it's things like
there are certain actors I know I don't agree with personally, politically, etc., but I can still enjoy their content and their art.
Yes, but if you're concentrating on Lawrence Fox, the politician,
but why would you if you're watching Lewis?
He's an actor.
Because I think that he's made such a big thing out of being out there as a politician and having controversial views.
But again, we're going to before the politics. The reason he's gone into politics is because of that. So I'm going to before that.
Yes, but this is what we're talking about now and what he does next. And so it's him going back into acting, following the fact. Yes, and when he played Lewis, I believed in him entirely. But then since then, I'd be very conscious of his politics. So I saw him on screen.
Nigel, may I ask you then, what's the difference between Lawrence Fox and Gary Lineker spouting off on Twitter? Because Gary Lineker fits into the acceptable orthodoxy. So what's the difference? Because I know Gary Lineker's political views. He's a globalist, he's anti-conservative.
We'll leave the viewers to answer that question. We've got to move on. Coming up, it's the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Prince Andrew become a working royal again? According to reports, Prince Andrew's daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, have begged their uncle, Prince Charles, to allow their father back into the firm. But it's been reported that Prince Charles has rejected their request. Prince Andrew has been marred in controversy over his links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Since all of this, the royal family have kept Prince Andrew away from the spotlight. We'll get back to that, but first, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales, Wales now. Plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall. Temperatures around 21. And a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end to the day for the northeast of England, although there will be some glimmers of sunshine. Feeling fairly pleasant despite that cloud. Temperatures around 20 and the wind's quite light. A bright end to the day for southern Scotland as dusk approaches. Light winds and dry weather, feeling pleasant. Temperatures around 17 to 19. On the cloudy side, if we head over to Northern Ireland for this evening, and we're told scattered showers across the country. Some of those on the heavy side. Temperatures about 17. So lots of places across the UK remaining dry overnight tonight. Some clear spells, though a few showers for some in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Calvin Robinson covering for Nana this week on GB News, on TV and on digital radio. It's time for our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? According to reports, Prince Andrew's daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, asked their uncle Prince Charles if their father could be given a new job and a way back into the royal life. Unsurprisingly, Prince Charles has ruled out a return. Earlier this year, Her Majesty the Queen stripped Prince Andrew of all his military titles, royal patronages, as well as removing his privileged HRH status. Andrew has been marred in controversy over his links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Back in February this year, the prince settled in a civil suit case outside of court, after he was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre back in 2001. Easy for you to say. He has vehemently denied all allegations made against him. Since all the revelations came to light, the royal family have attempted to hide Prince Andrew away to prevent further reputational damage to the monarchy. So this hour, I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? I have the pleasure now of being joined in the studio by a royal biographer, Angela Levin. Angela, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
What are your thoughts? Should he come back?
Absolutely not, under no circumstances. I mean, I think he feels that because he paid out the money, which was originally supposed to be $2 million, but he did a last-minute deal, and it was between $3 and $4 million, so he got a bargain, really, that it's over and finished. But it isn't over and finished, because the shadow still hangs over him. And I don't think anybody wants him. I mean, he wants to go back to the Grenadier Guards, which is what he was involved with before. But, I mean, he would smear their reputation. And also, I find what is absolutely strange is here's a man of 62 who needs his mummy to help him find something to do. I mean, and pushes his children to ask his brother what he could do. I think that's absolutely a shocking thing.
But with Prince Charles, it's not necessarily about the reputational damage, is it? It's more he wants to slim down the royal family anyway.
I think it's a lot to do with the...
Is it?
Yes, the damage. I mean, Prince Andrew spent 3 full days with the Queen trying to get something out of her, which I think is terrible because she's not very well. No. And to sort of... He has a way of persuading her to do what he wants to do. But I think it was terrible. And I think that's one of the reasons why Catherine and Charles are sort of going to see the Queen very often. Prince Charles is going to see her every morning now, and I think they're worried that Andrew will push her into doing something, which will be very, very bad for the royal family. I mean, nobody wants someone with that sort of issue hanging over them, in my view, as a member of the royal family. They don't have to be perfect by any means at all, but they have to show the right way to behave.
It's a good example, at least.
Yes, exactly.
Do you think Prince Andrew is still Her Majesty the Queen's favourite?
Well, I don't know. I think she's probably got great-grandchildren who are her favourites now. But certainly he was when he was small. There was a big gap between Princess Anne and then him. And by the time Prince Andrew arrived, she felt more relaxed being a queen. She could take some time off. She could spend it with him. And so the closeness was much better. And of course, Prince Philip liked him because he was somebody who liked to play football. He was very macho, whereas Prince Charles loved gardens, you know, and he's less macho. Yes.
But regardless of all of this, the British public would never accept him back as a working royal anyway, would they?
No, that's what I think. You know, I think they would be absolutely furious with it. But I also think you mustn't bring your children into doing these things. Yeah. If he wants to do something, there are plenty of charities. I mean, I thought, and I don't mean this in a nasty way at all, that if he went to old age homes where people were a little bit suffering from dementia, they wouldn't know what his past was. He could help them. He could do things like that. But that's too low for him. You see, he's got to have something grand. He wants to be very important. He's always resented that he's the spare as well, we saw, as Harry has done. And I think that he couldn't go down to that level. But I think he should think again and work out for himself what he should do. I mean, they're all very upset that he doesn't know what to do with himself. Well, you know, he's a grown man. We all have to sort of take different paths if one doesn't work and work it out for ourselves.
Let's leave him on the side for a moment. Can the monarchy survive the digital age? How can it adapt and keep up with the times?
Well, I think it does quite a good job, actually. I think that the Queen is very subtle in her moving forward. And before little George was born, the law was changed that it doesn't have to be the first boy. It can be the first child. So a daughter could have become queen. That's a huge thing to change. She doesn't insist that women who are involved with the heirs to the throne have to be virgins now. That's gone. And I think that she does feel that the world is loosened up in an extraordinary way, which I think she can move forward for. And she knows specifically how to talk to all of us when there's a problem. I thought with the pandemic, and we were all getting, well, I was certainly getting very, very stressed at the beginning of it. We didn't know where to turn to. And she spoke to us like a very caring grandmother, but it was absolutely bright mentally. And she soothed loads of people. And I think that that was absolutely brilliant, that she could still do that and feel what we needed and what we wanted from her.
I think you're onto something there. She's more subtle. So, take another example, Harry and Meghan, they've got a new podcast out, or Meghan's got a podcast out, which you could say is an attempt at getting up with the times, but is it worthwhile?
It's diabolical. I forced myself to listen to it. Yeah. But actually what was awful was right at the end when she said, I wanted it to be all about me. I didn't want it to be about anyone else. And before, it's always within the eye of the press, and I wanted it just to be about me. And I think that's tells you a lot about her. She's not interested in anyone else. It's just got to be about me.
Angela, I noticed that from the trailers. It was me, myself. I thought, no, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Angela Levin, royal biographer. Always good to hear from you. You are now with Calvin Robinson, covering for Nana this week on GB News on TV and on digital radio. And coming up, we'll continue our great British debate. I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. But first, here's the latest news headlines.
Hello, it's 5:32. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have warned that anyone withholding information are protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot by a gunman on Monday when he chased his intended target into her home in Liverpool. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are pleading to anyone with any information to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
The Prime Minister says a huge package of financial support will be delivered to help struggling households through the energy crisis. Writing in the Daily Mail newspaper, Boris Johnson acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. More than 25,000 migrants have crossed the Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday, the Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey across from France. Millions of people are expected to attend the Notting Hill Carnival in West London, which is back after a 2-year break because of the pandemic. Europe's biggest street festival celebrates a fusion of Caribbean, African and European cultures. Today is Family Day, featuring a children's parade and music. It ends tomorrow with the adults putting on a colourful show. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere, Calvin will be back in just a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Robinson covering for Nana this week, and this is GB News on your TV and on your digital radio. Let's get back to our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? According to reports, Prince Andrew's daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, asked their uncle Prince Charles if their father could be given a new job and a way back into royal life. Unsurprisingly, Prince Charles ruled this out. Earlier this year, the Queen stripped Prince Andrew of all his military titles, royal patronages, as well as removing his privileged HRH status. Andrew has been marred in controversy over his links to convicted sex offenders Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Since all of this came to light, the royal family have attempted to keep Prince Andrew hidden to prevent any further embarrassment. So this hour, I'm asking, should Prince Andrew come back as a working royal? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and I believe I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly. Nice of you to join us, Danny. How are you doing? Should he come back?
Well, I might be in a minority of one. I love the line there is that the royal family have kept him hidden, like he's been locked away under the stairs.
Well, on that, I need to say he has denied all of the allegations.
Of course, I might be in a minority of one because I believe that once you set a precedent of basically demonising someone who hasn't been found guilty. Yes, I know he wasn't found not guilty. He didn't go and clear his name. I understand all of that. But I think it's a precedent that would be unwelcome, that people who don't have criminal records are no longer allowed to do certain things. Now, I understand that he's not the most popular of the royal family. I guess I hear that he's difficult to be around and to work for. I get all of that.
And just to be clear, he's not guilty or not guilty. He reached an agreement outside of court.
Correct. So, for clarification, he hasn't been found guilty. That's my point.
Yeah.
And for people who haven't been found guilty, for them to be marginalised, I think, is setting a dangerous precedent.
OK. Nigel?
I think the issue here is that he absolutely denies all the allegations. And then you then have to start thinking, well, hang on, how come he paid at least $3 million, it may have been more, in an out-of-court settlement to somebody he says he never actually met.
Okay.
And so until you clear your name, I think it would be inappropriate for him to do royal duties. And at the moment, he won't talk to the FBI, he won't talk to lawyers who want to interview him, and he wouldn't go and face his accuser in court.
OK. How about the royals as a whole, though? Are younger people even interested in the royal family anymore?
I would like to think so. I'm a massive royalist. I think the Queen is ace.
I love that from you. I wasn't expecting you to be a big
down as a Republican or something. Oh, no, I love the royal family. I think they're brilliant. I think they're great for the country. Oh, they're sound.
No, you're sound for once, Danny.
Oh, I'm sound for once. No, I love them. I hope the Queen has plenty more years and plenty more miles in the tank. I really do. Whether they connect to the young generation, I don't know, but I hope so. I think they're brilliant for the country.
Oh, good. I can see Nigel's itching to,
in my
balance
case,
this out.
that I'm a monarchist, but I'm not a royalist.
OK.
And I believe that having a non-political head of state is really important. I think we're very lucky to have one.
Yes.
I'm not too enamoured of the royal family as a whole.
What do you think about the future of the royal family in the digital age, though?
Why would the digital age actually change the kind of thing they do? I mean, they would still go out to actually meet people. That seems to be their job. It's glad handing. It's that kind of thing. I don't see why that should change. I do like Prince Charles's idea of a slimmed-down monarchy. The ones who actually do the job, great. And obviously, then, in a sense, that you've got a fairly large royal family. And those who perhaps haven't come up to the mark, which I think we throw Prince Andrew into that, probably doesn't have a function in the future.
But we didn't really used to know much about the royals, did we? They used to be mysterious and mythological almost. But now we see every single minute detail of their lives, don't we?
Yeah, Prince Andrew, should he come back to the royal family, what would he do as a working royal? I mean, he would just be hounded wherever he goes because people have made their mind up about him, like Nigel inferred earlier on. As far as working royals are concerned, how relevant they will be in the future, I don't know. It does worry me, though, Calv. Obviously, we all are on this planet for a finite amount of years. I think Queen Elizabeth, however many miles she has left in the tank, and then you have a highly politicised perception Prince Charles. I think I know how he feels politically, and that is going to sort of divide mere mortals like me and Nigel.
This is a tough one. So I'm a big royalist, a big monarchist, and I pray for Her Majesty the Queen every day. However, I have issues with things that Prince Charles has said recently over the green agenda, over the WEF agenda, over lockdown and COVID. How do we combine our views on the monarchy itself with the person who is wearing the crown?
Well, I'm talking about the importance of the monarch. When it comes to Prince Charles, I've got my reservations as well. I mean, I don't think taking bags full of cash is actually a very clever idea either. So there's an issue there. I have to say I'm really impressed with Prince William. If we were actually looking for a modern monarchy, I wouldn't mind skipping a generation and going to Prince William.
That would be constitutional. There is precedence for that.
There is indeed. Yeah, you could actually do that. And everything I've seen of Prince William makes him look like somebody who would be a good king. And bear in mind, he's an awful lot older than his grandmother when he's 40 now. So about time he was.
Interesting. Thank you, Nigel and Danny. Right, this show is nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome our great British voice. This is your opportunity to get on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. This hour, we're heading over to Edinburgh. We're going to speak with GB viewer Brian Dugan. Brian, are you with us? What are your thoughts on Prince Andrew returning to the firm?
Hi, Calvin. How are you? I've been listening with interest. The only people pushing for Andrew to be brought back into the fold to have some kind of working role again within the royal family are Andrew himself, his daughters, his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, and Danny, I think. Perhaps he also has friends who are pushing his case, but they don't seem to be too eager to put their heads above the parapet. Andrew was a guy who has kind of gallivanted around the global stage as some sort of envoy for British business. But now he only draws global infamy and revulsion. His Newsnight interview was a disaster. And although there was no expression of guilt attached to the out-of-court settlement, which you've already said quite rightly, for most people, his association with Jeffrey Epstein said enough. There is no public clamour for Andrew to return from his horse riding, from his pizza eating, from whatever else it is he now does. This is
okay,
pure
Brian.
self.
So there's no way back in for him. Just after what Danny and Nigel and I have been discussing, do you think we should skip a generation with Prince Charles, or would you like to see him become the next king?
I think that there is a lot to be said in terms of what you spoke about, in terms of perhaps missing a generation, in terms of making the monarchy meaningful in the present and in the future, and in terms of it resonating with young people in particular. I think that perhaps that skipping a generation might be wise and prudent on the part of the firm, on the part of the monarchy, in terms of that restoration that perhaps was achieved during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations and was put in jeopardy by the actions of Andrew and his handling of
the Jubilee was marvellous, wasn't it? Brian Dugan, thank you so much for joining us. It's always good to get our GB voices on. It's time for Supplement Sunday now, the part of the show where me and my panel look at some of the other stories making the papers today. I'm joined by political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Let's start with a story Nigel has for us about Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, this is a great story. Jacob Rees-Mogg has been banging on about civil servants getting back to their desks and because he doesn't think they work properly at home. That is complete nonsense, that if it depends on the job you do, whether you need to be in the office all the time. So now he's finally seen the light and he's going to sell off their offices instead.
Has he seen the light, or the story says they refused to stop working from home? So actually they've just not listened to him. Well,
the whole point is that Jacob Rees-Mogg isn't actually technically their boss, so they will be listening to the permanent secretaries. If you actually are required by the nature of your job to work from the office, then so you should. I work in the office when I have to. I work at home when it's just more sensible to do so. The same thing should apply to civil servants. What my company has done is sold off some office space to compensate for those people who are working from home. That's what Jacob Rees-Mogg should do. That you've got prime real estate in Whitehall that could make a lot of money, £1.5 billion according to this story. He'd be doing the right thing by getting rid of it.
Yeah, I think the problem is actually when you work from home, you work more productively and you spend too much time working because you're not just working from home, you're living at work. Danny, you don't have the privilege of doing that, do you, with your other half of your business? So
No,
what are your thoughts?
I don't, but when I was at the BBC, if the BBC asked me to work from home, I know that I would do very little.
Oh, really?
So, I mean,
so you're idle.
I am bone idle. I am bone idle. Yeah, for my very successful business away from journalism, I am bone idle. I like Jacob Rees-Mogg. Whether he is accountable for the Home Office is not that relevant to me. I think he's a major player in politics, and also he's an attention grabber when it comes to headlines.
And is he right to push these people to get back to work?
Very much so, I think, because I don't buy that everyone works harder from home. Personally,
not everybody.
Not everyone.
But there are certain jobs that can be done better from home.
Like what?
Including civil servants, where
including civil servants.
What if the minister wants to pop in and quickly have a chat with someone?
Then, if you need to talk to someone face to face, you must be in the office. If you're sitting at home doing a clerical job that you would just do on a computer at the office, then that is fine.
I don't know about all this people going to work from home, because I think, what about osmosis? What about picking things up from your colleagues? What about the social aspect of work?
All those are down to the individual. Okay. And so individuals should actually be able to choose how they work. Okay. And if they want to work flexibly, bit from home, I mean, I say a 4-hour commute if I work from home. That 4 hours is much more productive than sitting on a train.
Move closer to the office, I say. Danny, Danny's got a story about
snakes. A house.
Yeah, this is a great story. A campaign launched to ban snakes as pets after escaped python raided home. And we can see now, for the benefit of the radio listeners, what we are seeing is an 18-foot yellow python slithering its way up onto the roof of a terraced house and actually going into the bedroom. I mean, what a thing to wake up to, an 18-foot python. It ended happily because it was shooed away with a broom handle. One line from the BBC I really like on this is that a neighbour was walking past and, quote, "I recognise that snake," as if they walk past pythons every day of the week. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I do recognise that 18-foot python. It's not the 12-foot python.
As opposed to the 10 others.
Yeah, exactly. So you got the guy who woke up with an 18-foot long python in his bedroom. He's now saying that the government should get involved and ban large snakes.
Well, it could have been a child's bedroom, couldn't it? You can almost imagine the conversation. "Mummy, Daddy, there's a snake at my window." "No, there's not. Go back to bed."
I mean, the one thing that the neighbour is talking about is that the snake should be kept under control. Right. And that seems reasonable. Like dogs, you wouldn't let your dog wander around, so the same thing goes for a pet like that.
But there's a big difference between dogs and snakes, isn't there? You can't really relate to a snake. There's no feedback from a snake. Should these be allowed to be pets?
Well, I mean, provided they're kept under the right conditions and they don't wander around other people's houses, then yes, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be pets.
I agree. There shouldn't be a reason, but they're horrible animals. They're horrible pets.
But that's a value judgment. You just don't like snakes.
Well, what do they give you in return? A cat will purr on your lap. A dog will save you from a burglar. What does a snake do?
I don't know. I've never had a snake, so I've no idea how we get on.
There's no relationship.
There's no relationship. The thing just looks at it through your beady eyes and all of that, and then wants to.
But presumably people who own them are actually quite fond of them.
Well, they're
but I'm sure people would be fond of having lions and tigers and all kinds of strange pets, wouldn't they? But they're not allowed for a good reason.
Oh, no, I get a lion and tiger. Again, that would be an interesting pet to have, but a snake.
All right, let's leave the snakes there. Nigel, you've got a story about gardening, I believe.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, this is about the word gardening. And what it is an awful lot of people do green-fingered stuff, but want to call themselves something different. So things like plant daddy, plant parenthood, crazy plant daddy, etc. And what is being argued here by a scientist who's a gardener is, why can't we just use the word gardening? Now, I'm not fussed either way. I don't garden. I've never gardened.
Well, I love that you chose this story, though.
Highly unlikely I ever will garden.
But I don't know. It's like vegans wanting to be called plant-based. Somehow, does it add a certain je ne sais quoi to it, or is it snobby?
I think it's a bit snobby, yeah. I just think it's looking for different words because gardener sounds a bit pedestrian. But that's what it is. If you are actually growing plants, you're gardening.
Danny?
And, of course, the old joke, how do you know someone's a vegan? Because they'll tell you. I mean, I'm not green-fingered. My wife does the mowing and the gentle tendering of any rose bushes in our garden. So, yeah.
What's the wife's name?
Danielle. Danny and Danny.
Danielle.
So yes, I'm not really into gardening. You look a type of...
You think?
Yeah, you look like a gardener.
I'm not green-thumbed at all. My friend bought me a plant recently. It's already dead.
Don't get a pet.
I can look after pets because I care about pets. Plants they just sit there. They don't give you anything back. Anyway, we've got one more story from Danny about Apple, I believe.
Yeah. OK. Here's the headline: their delusions and hypocrisy are beyond parody as Apple staff claim it's racist and sexist to force them back into the office.
Wait, what?
Yeah. You see, this is difficult to get your head round, Calv, and I've read this article a number of times, and I still can't quite get my head round it.
How is it racist and or sexist?
It's a sentiment shared by Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook, who said we need more people to work in the office. I think it's very, very important. 3 days a week, can you imagine how inhumane? And the connection here between racism and sexism is just incalculable. I just cannot calculate the gist of this story. And it's once again, change the makeup of our workforce. Younger, whiter, more male-dominated, more neuronormative, more able-bodied. In short, it will be leading to privilege, deciding who can work for Apple, not who is going to be the best fit. Again, basically, it comes down to inclusion, it comes down to equity, diversity, social justice, and just a load of old baloney.
If I'm being charitable, I would say these are entitled people. If I'm not being charitable, I'd say they're spoiled brats.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yep, I'm with you on that.
So they should get back to work.
I don't think they should necessarily get back to work, but for different reasons.
But not because it's racist
not
and or
because
sexist.
it's racist or sexist, no.
OK. I have nothing else to say about that. I think absolutely ridiculous. But if you work in an office and you don't work around other people, you're going to be get more lonely, get more isolated.
Right.
We've had lockdown. We've had 2 years of people not being in contact with other people. I think as much as possible, we should encourage people to be social beings again.
I think that's absolutely fine, but do you see my point about you can do all these things flexibly? So for 3 days a week, I'm around people. 2 days in the House of Commons.
So who decides, though? Surely, if the job is advertised as a flexible job, that's fine. But the problem we have now is that people are going for jobs, getting them, and saying, actually, I don't want to come into the office, I don't want to come to work. And then the bosses are having to fight back.
Well, I mean, the whole point is you would discuss this with your boss about the best way for you to work. The difference now and from 2 years ago is that conversation can now take place.
I'd want to pay them a lot less as well if you work from home. I would. I would.
There's the London waiting, for one. That would have to go.
Yeah.
Transportation, that would have to go.
Yeah. I would. And also the fact that, mind you saying that, they heat their homes, don't they? Could be counterproductive in the winter if you're working from home with the energy prices going through the roof. Well, they may not want to work from home in the winter.
Paying to work. No, I mean, you should get the same amount of money, but it does depend on the job you do. And if I've got a day's writing to do, I'm better off doing it at home than going into the office and doing exactly the same thing.
What time do you get up for work then?
Oh, I get up at work at a normal time. I'm at my desk by
You don't do
9
any
o'clock.
skiving?
No, I don't do any skiving. There's no time to skive.
But do you not think for a lot of people that are in different types of jobs, if their work can be done remotely and if they show their boss suddenly they don't have to have an office, they don't have to pay rent in a building, they can recruit people from anywhere, they can suddenly recruit people much cheaper abroad than they can here. Why would you recruit homegrown British talent if you don't need to?
Well, I mean, there is an element of that. But again, it depends what the job is. That if you've got a civil servant who is operating with people and on behalf of the government, you expect that person to be based in this country.
Yeah, I'd expect them to be in Whitehall too, to be honest.
Well,
in a stone's throw's distance away from the nearest
minister. I think they could be down in Sussex or Norfolk or wherever else they may come from.
I want to know what our viewers have been saying about this. On today's show, we've been asking, should students still be taught Shakespeare? And according to our Twitter poll, 86% of you said yes, and 14% of you said no. Incredible. It speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? Thank you so much for my panel for engaging on that conversation. We've had political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and broadcaster Danny Kelly. I thought people would say no to being taught Shakespeare because they find it fuddy-duddy or they struggle with the language. But this is due to it being apparently racist and or offensive.
Which it's not.
That's it. We've settled it. Everyone should be learning Shakespeare. It influenced our country, our language, our heritage, and all of it. Thank you guys for engaging. It's been a pleasure covering for Nana this week. God bless her. She'll be back next week, and I will be on with Leo on Saturday. God bless. See you soon.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales now, plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall, temperatures around 21, and a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end of the day for the northeast.